Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Krashy, and today I want to go over how you make a build, or like the theory crafting process of Pokemon Unite. Now, I feel like items just always come up in conversation. What builds are you running? What combinations are you running? Why is a certain item good on this character? Why is a certain item bad or good at all? And I figured we would do this as almost like a refresher for anybody that's new, maybe just has never really thought about the game in this way. Go ahead and dive into it. So here we are on UniteDB, and this is the resource. You can check the link in the description for this video. Resource that gives you all the information about the items. It'll tell you stats are, what they do, the hidden internal cooldowns if you've never seen any of that before, and very, very important. I want to quickly do something that I think is just going to be a good service for everybody and get some of the bad stuff out of the way. Looking at battle items really quickly, there's only really one battle item that's actually pretty useless, and it's Goal Getter. Goal Getter just it's pretty pointless. You don't need this. You're not going to use it on anybody. Slow Smoke is incredibly niche. Potion's pretty niche. Fluffy Tail's pretty niche. But everything else is pretty good. Goal Getter's bad. We'll get that out of the way. Otherwise, use whatever you want. Use your best judgment. Check out guides and builds in certain characters. As for the held items, there are about 4 or 5 items that are uniquely terrible, like absolutely terrible, and we'll talk about why. So talk about why these items are bad, and then we'll go into that theory crafting process for this video. So in my opinion, the worst item in the game is Rocky Helmet. Let's look at this item and let's break it down really quickly. HP plus 240, defense plus 42, that's normal defense. After absorbing enough damage, a deal percent damage based on your max HP. So it says 3, 4, and 5%, but level 30 it's 5% of your max HP to nearby enemies. It has a 2-second cooldown, and it takes 10% HP damage trigger in a single attack. So the problem with this item is that you have to take 10% of your HP in a single attack to then get this item effect to pop off, to actually trigger. So that's the word it uses, 10% HP damage trigger. It almost never happens. It actually almost never happens. Like it does happen, but it's so rare. And this item, the reason why nobody uses it and the reason why it's not good is because this item essentially has no item effect. It's basically just a Rocky Helm with 240 HP and 42 defense. One of the worst items in the game. We're going to talk about item effects here in just a second. Uniquely terrible. Shell Bell. SP attack 24, cooldown reduction plus 4.5. This is all at level 30. Keep that in mind, these numbers that we're looking at. Recover, again, 45, 60, 75. You look at the last number, that's level 30. So you recover 75, flat 75, plus 45% SP attack. And then it's HP when successfully landing a move. It has a 10-second cooldown. This item is terrible because it has a 10-second cooldown and the heal is small. So let's look at it. Let's look at something really quickly. We're going to take Gardevoir, level 15. She has 1000 SP attack for simplicity. 1000 SP attack. So what is 45% of 1000? Well, let's just use 50. Let's say 500 plus 75. She heals for 575 off of a single move at level 15. But the character has 6300 health. So even on Gardevoir, like a just shy of a 600 health heal on a 10-second cooldown is not big enough. It's not impactful. It doesn't really help you. You're not really healing that much. So not a very good item. Not a very good item. Leftovers, HP recovery. So this is meant to be a healing, like self-healing kind of health over time item. Recovers health over time, auto combat by 2% HP per second. And then it says 7 seconds after leaving combat. Well, this is where the item is bad. The game won't tell you this, is that you have to be out of combat for 7 seconds. Some of y'all know this, most of y'all know this. It just takes too long to get the value out of this. Because you have to wait 7 seconds to get out of combat, then you start healing and recovering your health over time, and then you have to wait for that to actually give you that value. The funny thing is if you've ever seen the circle healing trick on a goal, you don't know this, should know this, where you can spin around and heal yourself on an actual like health pad on a goal. It's actually more health recovery just doing that, stepping in and off of a goal, than Leftovers is on its own. It's pretty funny. On the tier 1 goals too. So yeah, pretty uniquely terrible. Assault Vest is actually not a bad item. It's not terrible, but 270 defense, 42 SP defense, You gain a shield for 15%, max HP, but it's the 7 seconds out of combat. Same thing, 7 seconds out of combat is a long time. So you have to wait and get that value. Again, not the worst item in the world. But leftovers, Rocky Helm, Shell Bell, uniquely terrible items. Score Shield, same thing. It's you know, it's not very good anymore. It doesn't have a big enough shield. The shield gets hit first, and it's just unfortunately not very strong. Floatstone, same thing as Assault Vest and Leftovers. 7 seconds out of combat to get the value. It's really, really high. A lot of wasted time that you have to wait around. So you get my point. I'm listing some of the really bad items. So really quickly, just to summarize: Rocky Helm, Shell Bell, Floatstone, Score Shield, Leftovers. Do not use these items. They are not good enough. I wouldn't recommend them on anyone. Assault Vest is a little bit better, but not much better. It's just like 1 tier higher than these items. Not the worst thing in the world to use, but not very good. All right, let's talk about item effects. What is so important about item effects? Every single item has this green text that gives you what the item's flat stats are, and then it has like the gray text. And we're just talking about UnitedDB's website, but it's got the green text that gives you the flat stats and what the item has on it, and then it gives you the item effect. Let's look at Muscle Band, because Muscle Band, Fraggles had a really great video talking about the Muscle Band discovery that MathCore did a while back, and the Teeds video about attack speed. Let's talk about Muscle Band. It has 15 attack and plus 7.5% attack speed. Well, we now know that 7.5% attack speed is weird, right? And if you haven't seen that video, I definitely recommend checking it out on Spraggle's channel. The attack speed doesn't really work the way that it says that it works. It works on some characters. It doesn't work on other characters at all. It kind of works at certain levels. It's very bizarre. So, for example, on Charizard, we actually know from testing that 7.5% attack speed does nothing on Charizard. It literally does not impact his attack speed at all. So you're thinking to yourself, oh, well, that must mean that Muscle Band is a bad item on Charizard. Well, no. And here's why. No one, and this is where we start the theory crafting. No one should ever take an item for its flat stats. You never want to look at an item and say, oh, it has plus 15 attack and plus 7.5% attack speed. That's why I want it. No. You look at the item effect. That's why you want the item. The flat stats just happen to be like the cherry on top. Flat stats really are just for context. It's to give you an idea of what the item is kind of there to do, but it's like the item effect is the actual reason. So the reason you use Muscle Band on ranged characters, it doesn't matter if they're SP attackers, it doesn't matter if they're supports, it doesn't matter if they're sometimes even tanks. You use it because deal additional damage with basic attacks by 3% of the target's remaining HP. You can be an Eldegoss, Slowbro, a Pikachu, or a Cinderace, and when you auto attack, you will deal 3% of that target's remaining HP. So I just listed a normal attacker, a special attacker, a defender, and a supporter, all who use Muscle Band, or who could use Muscle Band. Slowbro doesn't always use it, but you get the point. Good. Yeah. So that's why you use these items. Same thing. Focus Band gives you some defenses. That's great, but you don't take it for the defenses. I'm sure it's great. It's extra. It's extra. Upon reaching 25% HP, recover HP each second for 3 seconds by 14% of your missing HP. And this is a huge heal that helps you. Weakness Policy. Does anybody take it because it gives 210 HP or plus 15 attack? Well, no. You take it because upon taking damage, you apply a 3% attack buff up to 4 stacks. So that's that extra 12% of your attack stat. These are why you take these items. You take these items because of what they do. So, to get this point out of the way, because this I hear all the time. Well, the cooldown reduction on Shell Bell, the cooldown reduction, 4.5% is less than 1 second. It's not giving you cooldown reduction. Is it literally giving you cooldown reduction? Yes. Is it? It's negligible. It's negligible. The cooldown reduction on these items is so pointless. You do not take Shell Bell because it gives you cooldown reduction and you can spam your abilities. Not how it works. You got to do the math on it. You got to look at the item effect. The item effect of this item is too weak to warrant using a slot to ever give to a character in the game, essentially. So, how do you make a build? Well, this is where we start talking about stats and how they actually apply to characters. This is where the game gets really interesting and deep, and you have to start looking at scalings. So let's pull up You know what? Gardevoir is a good example. Let's look at this character. What does scaling mean? So first and foremost, every character has a stat sheet like this, where you start at level 1 and you have all your stats, and then every level your stats change. Every level your stats change. So when we're looking at Gardevoir, this is an SP attacker. Let's look at her SP attack. So we start at 50, we end at 1,000. So that's a big jump, right? From 50 to 1,000. That's a huge number. This character scales with SP attack very well. The character scales well. Does that make sense? Their own stats, they scale well. The deeper you go in the game, the bigger and bigger this number is going to go. And that's going to be consistent for every character, but it may not be that big. So let's look at another character really quickly. I said Slowbro earlier. Let's look at Slowbro. So Slowbro's stat sheet, SP attack. It is an SP attacker. We know that because it's a tank. 50, same starting point, 50-50. But the ending result is 411. So as far as Slowbro's SP attack, the character doesn't scale very well. The character itself doesn't scale very well. So would you use an item like Wise Glasses, which increases your SP attack by 7%? Would you rather use that item on Gardevoir, 7% of 1,000, or Slowbro, 7% of 411? Well, Slowbro, right? Ironically enough, Choice Specs is actually pretty good on Slowbro because you can use it to secure, but that's a little bit more meta to talk about like the early game and actually securing farm. But you would not want to use an item like Wise Glasses specifically because it's not going to raise that value much, right? Like to slot an item that's going to only give you 7% of 411, it's not nearly as valuable as slotting that item on a character that's going to give you 7% of 1,000. This is where you start looking at, you know, if the items are good to the characters. Now you have ability scaling. So, for example, let's look at Future Sight. Future Sight, and this is the damage equation. These are the damage equations that the moves will give you. Every ability has 3 parts to how it does damage, to how it calculates how much damage it's going to do. It has a scaling percentage, a numerical value times your level section, and a flat section. So Future Sight will always hit for 880 plus 21 times your level. So it'll hit for 880 at when do you get this? Level 5. So at 880, it'll hit for, or at level 5, it'll hit for 21 times 5 plus 880. Then it will also be applying an additional 149% of your SP attack. So we could actually do the math at level 5. I'm not going to do it because I'm lazy. We could do the math and take 149% of 171 plus 21 times 5 plus 880. And that's how much that Future Sight's going to hit for. And that's before items, because I haven't even put any items on. So you have to look and see if these scale well, if these abilities scale well. Usually that just means the higher percentage, the better, right? That's really all it means. So you look at the characters, you look and see if they scale and if it's worth using certain items on them, and then you look and see if their abilities scale to continue to see if putting those items on them to get those higher stats is worth it. So this is where you start making builds. And then you can get a little bit more in-depth and meta with, well, on Ninetales, let's use Ninetales for a perfect example. On Ninetales, this character, look at the stat sheet. We go from 50 SP attack to 1,002. That's good. That's good scaling, right? Okay. So we can actually confidently say that SP attack wise, putting Wise Glasses on Ninetales is good, right? Character scales well. Cool. All right, well, let's look at the ability scaling now. Avalanche Dazzling Gleam, 36%, 60%, 61%. Blizzard, 39% initial blast. Second hit is going to be 19.5%. It does tick 6 times. Okay. Damage blast initial. This is increased damage at 42.8, so it goes up from 39 to 42.8. And then the damage area is 21.4 with 6 ticks. Or the Aurora Veil heals for 5% of the boosted attack. So 224% on the Unite move. This is the only thing that scales. Everything else doesn't scale very well. Like, adding these little bits of damage into this equation, these numbers are just so low that this character itself doesn't actually scale very well. Or this character's abilities don't scale very well. So putting wise glasses on Ninetales is going to give you 7% of 1002, but that extra percentage that you're getting is not actually giving you a ton of damage because the abilities don't scale well with damage. They don't scale well with SP attack. So what build do you see run on Dazzling Gleam Aurora Veil? Well, Aurora Veil doesn't really have much scaling because it's just got like a really small healing. So Aurora Veil is kind of pretty self-contained and isolated, and Dazzling Gleam only does 60%. So what do you see? What actually gets run on this character? Well, you got Muscle Scope Focus. That's one build I guess people run. I like Muscle Focus and Buddy. That's always kind of been the tried and true, the Muscle Focus Buddy. So you can see even on an Avalanche Blizzard build on this recommended build page, because this is just U9DB's recommended builds, they have choice specs on here. So and choice specs is a great item for SP attackers because it has like its own scaling. You don't know how the item works. It does a flat 60 plus 40% of their SP attack as like a burst damage with the move. So this would be good to run on Ninetales because you can get that scaling into the item that has its own damage. But the actual character itself with, like, say, Wise Glasses is not going to scale very well because the abilities don't scale well. This is how you theory craft. I'm probably sure that I'm being a little confusing, but you just have to look at the character and get all the context, the bigger picture, and decide, would this be good? Would this be good on this character? And then you try it out and you play it by feel, right? And then you play it by play style. You can look at a character like Lucario and know that there's so many items you can run on this character. And as far as stacking items go, basically the way that stacking items works is really simple. The bigger the percentage, the better the stacking item is, right? That said, I did a whole talk last night on my stream about how stacking items are not nearly as viable to actually use as people think. And it's mostly just because the characters it's incredibly hard to stack some of them. There's like, in my opinion, there's like 7 characters that should be stacking. Everybody else is just kind of like, if you want to do it for fun. And I could probably list those really quickly, but I don't know if I'll go into that right now. That could be a topic for another day. But friends, that's kind of my thought process for today. There's definitely a lot of theory crafting that goes into these builds and the way that people can itemize and things of that nature. And then there's a little bit of playstyle variance too, but you have to be looking at the item effect. That's the biggest part, right? You got to be looking at what does the item actually itself do, and not the flat stats on it. How can these characters actually use these stats that the items are giving us? Whether it's flat attack, are they actually using that flat attack well? If it's Wise Glasses, for example, this is a really good example because it's really easy to kind of see. Can the character really use that 7%? Do they really use it? Because you need to know if they scale, so the 7% is worth it, and then you need to know if their abilities scale well, so that 7% can then be applied to that damage equation. Defensive items they have great value. Focus Band is probably the best item in the game. Like, seriously, it probably is. Buddy Barrier is still very much so up there. Muscle Band, one of the best items in the game. You can almost put this on everybody. And then you have your more niche items, right? Like you do. They're just more niche. Energy Amplifier is really good on a lot of characters. Scope Lens is specifically good on auto attackers. Razor Claw is like good on like assassins and like all-rounders or speedsters all-rounders. Weakness Policy is really, really good on anybody that scales well with attack stat. You see this a lot on all-rounders. I use it on Zero Aura. You can put it on some defenders. So yeah, get out there, theory craft. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Wanted to kind of refresh us, right? Put this out there as a refresher. But friends, thank you so much for watching. Drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for future Pokemon Unite content. If you haven't, ask questions in this one. If you're still confused, like I want to clarify, I'm trying to put this out there, but it does get a little confusing because this game, if you go in game, they're not going to tell you anything. But you come to these third-party websites like UnitedDB, and you get all this information, the cooldowns, exactly what the item does, and knowing the behind-the-scenes information of how these characters work from their scalings, all of this stuff, we would never know what items are good on what characters if we didn't have these kinds of resources. So there you have it. As always, friends, be sure to be kind of one another. Tell someone you love them. I'll see you next video.